Good afternoon, everyone. First and foremost, I'd like to welcome you all to this afternoon's webinar entitled EcoBricks, a solution within the green economy. My name is Samriddhi Sharma, and I'm honored to be a host for this afternoon. This session is presented to you by SciFest Africa, South Africa's National Science Festival, with this year being our first ever virtual festival. The theme for the year is Take Root and Nurture, which celebrates the International Year of Plant Health as proclaimed by the United Nations. Take Root Nurture also feeds into the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and recognizes that plants are relevant in various disciplines. I would like to introduce and welcome Mr. Ian Dummiser. Ian is an architect and a passionate edible gardener designer. His biggest project to date is the Angama Mara Edible Food Experiential Garden in Kenya, an integral design feature of the prestigious luxury safari lodge. Locally, Ian designed the Octopus Garden at the waterfront and a number of residential edible gardens. Ian is the founder and vision manager of the Ecobrick Exchange, working towards environmentally friendly construction methods to protect the environment from plastic, as well as support early childhood development, which is very under-supported in South Africa. Ian has received numerous awards for his incredible work, which includes the SAB Social Innovation Award in 2014, Saint Gobain People's Choice Award in 2015, Red Bull Ama Pico Social Entrepreneur Candidate in 2015, United Nations Seed Award in 2015, Petco Award for Public Campaign in Recycling 2018, and Ecologic Awards for the Green Economy in 2018. I am super excited to hear what Ian has to share with us today, and I'm sure you all are too. Please feel free to send your burning questions and comments throughout the webinar. If you're using the Zoom platform, please use the Q&A section. And if you're following us on Facebook, please use the comments section. So without further ado, Ian, over to you.
Thanks so much, Sam, for that kind and introduction. And thanks for the opportunity to be in this platform. I'm very excited to be here. And it's much more comfortable than my usual form of presenting on a stage. Okay, so I am going to share my screen and then we can get started. Okay, hope you can all see me nicely. So today I would like to chat to you about EcoBricks as a solution within the green economy. I've divided up the talk into three main sections. So firstly, I'm going to talk a little bit about the green economy and particularly Ecobrick's role within them. Then I'm going to speak about Ecobrick Trivia. And lastly, because I know that a lot of people want to get busy themselves, I'm going to talk about what you should consider if you are planning a project of your own. But first, let's just quickly remind everyone what is an Ecobrick. So here I've got a nice yellow one. But basically, an Ecobrick, for those who don't know, is a plastic bottle filled with non-recyclable soft plastics. You make them by twisting and squishing your plastics and stuffing them down with a stick until the bottle feels hard. And it should weigh at least 500 grams if it's a 2-liter bottle, or a bit more than that if it's a 2.5-liter bottle. Yeah, I've also done a video which is on our YouTube channel. And I believe the link for our channel will be in the show notes below. But here in the video, you'll see exactly what size of bottle you should use, some tricks that you consider, and also why you should consider making them in your area. So do visit that video when you have a moment. Okay, and while I still have everyone's full attention, I would like to also just note that our website is ecobrickexchange.org, and our social media on Facebook and Instagram, you'll find us at Ecobrick Exchange. And then recently we've launched a newsletter called The Green News Worth Sharing, which you can find on Substack. Again, we'll put that in the show notes. But just a note on communications, you know, the Ecobrick scene in the last couple of years has been changing and evolving a lot. And social media, you know, only 1.8% of our followers, for example, on our Facebook page actually see what we post. So getting the news directly into your inbox is a great way to do that. So we encourage those who are interested to subscribe. Okay, so let's talk about the green economy. The best definition that I found was by a man named Manish Bhatna. I hope I've said that right, of the World Resource Institute. He defines it as a green economy can be thought of as an alternative vision for growth and development, one that can generate growth and improvements in people's lives in ways consistent with sustainable development. The green economy promotes a triple bottom line, sustaining and advancing economic, environmental, and social well-being. So to me, what's key here is to say this is as opposed to the current way of doing things, which is all about profit and don't worry about the environment. So the different pillars within the green economy are climate change, the circular economy, water conservation and natural disaster prevention, environmental protection, resource saving and management, and then ecosystem protection and recovery. So those are the broad themes. And later, once I've discussed more about EcoBricks, we'll see how the EcoBrick solution fits into this. Just to speak about the circular economy, on the left side, you'll see the domestic plastic cycle. So in the middle, you've got the house, and the house, well, we as people, we generate plastic waste, which you can then in turn make into an EcoBrick. You can stack these into a wall or to a different structure, and you can build a house. So that's the plastic cycle of the domestic plastic cycle. Then, if we speak about the construction plastic cycle, if you build with EcoBricks in a particular way, you can actually then, once that building has reached the end of its life, you can demolish the building, you can reclaim the EcoBricks, and you can restack them and use them again. So a PET plastic like this, studies show that if kept out of the direct sunlight, they can last, or they do last, 450 years before they start to break down. So as a building material, if we can use them again and again, it's a nice way to conserve materials and to stop the linear approach. Okay, and then this is an interesting one. We actually aim for the EcoBrick to be extinct by 2035. I know that's a funny thing to say from an organization called the Ecobrick Exchange, but why do we say this? We want single-use plastics to become either replaced by a different, maybe algae, or maybe some young scientists here listening can suggest a different material. Or another approach is for plastic to become so valuable and recyclable that people rather want to recycle it back into and to use it again. So we hope that by 2035, the EcoBrick concept will be extinct. Okay, let's talk about Ecobrick Trivia in general. Make sure that I'm keeping an eye on time because I do want to keep time for questions at the end. Okay, so let's talk about past, present, and future. One of the first places where EcoBricks were used was in Central America, in Guatemala. And here you can see the early construction methods where they used concrete columns and frames, and they attached chicken mesh to this. The EcoBricks were stacked vertically and then plastered over. I've actually visited Guatemala in 2009, and I was amazed by all the plastic pollution. At the time, I didn't know about the EcoBricks, and I went to the very lake where it was invented, but I didn't see them. And everyone advised me not to swim in the lake, including my wife. But I didn't want to listen. It was such a beautiful lake and it was hot. So I swam and I became sick because the plastic pollution is so rife there. So that was in between my bachelor's degree and my master's degree when I was traveling. But after I finished studying architecture, I came across the Ecobrick concept for the first time in a little town called Greyton, where a great project was started to transform an illegal dumping site into a beautiful educational classroom. So Nicola Vernon from the Greyton Transition Network and a team of people. In fact, Joe Stodgel was an American exchange student, and he was using the Ecobrick as a form of his sustainability studies practical. And I came across the concept and I couldn't understand why in South Africa no one was using it. And what I quickly understood is that it had never been approved before as an alternative building material here in South Africa. And so I started asking questions as a young architect. I was asking, engineers and quantity surveyors and architects, and people didn't know anything about it. And an architectural mentor of mine said to me, Ian, if you ask the municipality if you can build a school or a house out of bottles, once they stop laughing, they'll say no. But at the same time, he also lent his support, and the Ecobrick Exchange was started in Port Elizabeth in order to create a precedent so as to get a school building plan approved through the municipality. And we identified Penguins Preschool, run by the passionate Blomi Nonshinga. And as a team of friends, we got together and we registered the Ecobrick Exchange. So this is how the school looked back then. It's an RDP house, and the school was built as a shack behind the house. And the plan is to build a double-story structure. And the building plan took 32 months, but eventually it was approved. And in the process, we've been assisting Blomi with the fundraising to execute the construction phase. But it is a considerable amount of money that she needs to raise. And so it's been quite a journey. But there's a great team of people led by Kevin Kimwell. He's a passionate architect. And so that project's still ongoing. In the meantime, the city of Cape Town heard about what we were doing, and they were planning to build a whole school campus using reclaimed materials. So they asked us to get involved, and we ran, it was in the Delft community, and we ran a program within the schools in the area where kids had to, as a competition, make as many Ecobricks as they can. And these Ecobricks, 4,500 of these Ecobricks were used on the internal walls of this building. We'll see more photos of this later on. But I thought at this point it would be a nice idea to define what upcycling means. So we all know about recycling, but upcycling is the transformation of a material so that it serves a higher purpose than its original function. That's the upcycling definition. So here, a bottle is serving a higher purpose as a wall material. Okay, so we've spoken about the past and the Ecobrick Exchange's journey. And initially it was all about the building process, but soon we started getting questions from all around the country. People wanted to know, they wanted to start their own project, and it wasn't feasible for us to fly around the country. And so we started doing workshops, and I developed a range of skills training programs. which trained artisans to build smaller structures of value for their own projects. And then if that goes well, they could maybe create a building. So over time, these programs have actually developed to include what we've now called the Green Economy Apprenticeship program. And this is looking at, again, looking at the green economy and seeing, okay, well, we've got EcoBricks, but that's just one form of waste. How can we upcycle more forms of waste and teach people how to do that in order to create income opportunities, to feed themselves, and to start living zero waste lives? Because if you recycle, if you make EcoBricks with your non-recyclable plastic, and if you compost your food waste, then ultimately you've got nothing to throw away. So this is one of the gardens here in Cape Town. It's called the Octopus Garden, and we built it out of EcoBricks. I'll speak about the technology in a bit later, but it's a nice example of our apprenticeship program, because this is where we run the program. But it in itself is an example of how a lawn space was used using EcoBricks and using food waste, which was composted. And now that the garden's been there for a year, it's grown 5.5 tons of fresh organic vegetables. So it's a nice example in the green economy. Okay, so these are the training programs, and the idea is that they are interlinking. So when we do programs and we start projects in communities, we start off with an activator. And this one speaks to, how do we educate people about environmental awareness, as well as responsible waste management? And then how do we give them the tools to run their own campaign within the area? And we like to work with ambassadors from that area in order to engage with the community. So that's the activator. The second is the micro builder. So together with that same community, we see, okay, well, what is needed in this community? How can we do some kind of small project to demonstrate the eco-friendly habits and the new skills which we are training? So then the community decides, do they want a furniture piece? Do they want a garden? Do they want an expo structure? And then it is selected and built and assessed, and then the artisans graduate. And the last program is the classic classroom, or it's any building design really, where we then see how we can create a building using the reclaimed materials from that community. The classic class program is the most expensive in terms of resources, but also in terms of time. It takes a long time to do a building. But the top two are less expensive and quicker to run. And also they impart key skills in a community, so that even if the building project doesn't happen, at least those skills are there. And then people can see how that they can look after their community and their environment whilst creating structures of value for themselves. So we always insist that we start off with the first two programs so that we can upskill people and we can leave behind sustaining programs. Okay, so our programs were actually recognized by the Ecologic Awards in 2018, and we got the bronze prize within the green economy. So again, to the green economy slide, if we look at these different pillars, I'd say these are the ones. So climate change, circular economy, environmental protection, resource saving and management, and then obviously eco protection and recovery. I think those are the ones where our work sort of aligns with pretty well, both in terms of the EcoBricks and our skills training programs. Okay, so as an organization nowadays, we see how we can educate schools, especially schools that are in under-resourced communities and in communities where there's high plastic pollution. We like to partner with eco clubs and societies that may have already started in schools, and then we work with them to see how the kids can together do a competition with their interclass competition and maybe build some small structures within their school. And at the end of the presentation, you'll see the different examples. But because there's been this demand for people to do projects all across the country, I've designed a range of, it's basically IKEA for EcoBricks. So we manufacture timber boarding, and we then create a manual or a video to show you how to assemble a bench or a table or a desk using your EcoBricks and then our kits. So again, on our YouTube channel, you can see the video of how to make one of the one-seater benches. These are some more of the applications. Okay, and then over the years, we've done a number of sort of innovation lounges and expo structures. You can see here my wife standing in the corner with her hands up. She's a core team member. Her name's Ilza. And there's Zianda as well, sticking her head out. Okay, so as I said before, what does the future hold? Ironically, we want the Ecobricks to rest in peace. So I've already touched on this, but you know, we do have a long way to go before single-use plastics and these soft plastics can become recyclable or be phased out. And in the meantime, we encourage people to stuff them into their EcoBricks so as to keep them out of the environment. And remember, plastic never biodegrades. And that's what's such an effective system about the EcoBrick, is that it encapsulates all these pieces of soft plastic that at the moment are have very low value. So one EcoBrick, for example, can contain 250 chip packets. And you know, every chip packet could break down into millions of little pieces of microplastic. So basically, an EcoBrick is a capsule to prevent all this plastic from entering into the environment. Okay, another thing that we look to in the future is if EcoBricks become more and more in demand in the construction space, which is what we are luckily starting to see, then how can we use EcoBricks to form a different currency? So if people in plastic polluted areas make EcoBricks, they can trade them for maybe data or food or cell phone airtime, so that they can then simultaneously clean up the environment and reap benefits for their family. Okay, and then there's another video on our YouTube channel which shows about the zero waste techniques, all the different zero waste techniques that you can do at home in order to have zero waste to landfill. So that's how we live at the moment. And over the last couple of years, we've been adopting more and more practices. And eventually now we've gotten to zero. There's a big community of the zero waste community. So do visit that thing, and you can have a look around the worm farms in my garden and the vegetable garden. Okay, and then on our YouTube channel, you'll also see the different, the wide variety of EcoBrick applications, as I mentioned. So large, medium, and small within the construction industry in South Africa. These are all videos that we had made just before lockdown. So you'll see what I usually look like in terms of my hair. It's usually longer and curly. Okay, so now let's talk about project planning. Okay, if you are planning any sort of project, in the world of project management, they speak about it's important to define your constraint. And the different constraints that they are is time, quality, and cost. Naturally, a lot of people try to do all of these things at one time. So for example, with a garden project, they want to have the best quality, they want it to be done very quickly, and they want it to be cheap as possible. But actually, if your defining constraint is time, and you want to do it really quickly, then it's either going to cost more or the quality is going to be affected. And before you start out your project, it's just important to understand what is your defining constraint. If it's cost, if you want to do something really cheaply, then you need to possibly have a lot more time. And if not, it's going to affect the quality of your project. Okay, and then also first consider, is your project for yourself, or are you building something for yourself in your home, or is it for somebody else? If it is for yourself, do you have the adequate resources for the project? Do you have the adequate skills for the project? And do you have the adequate rights? Do you own your land? Do you have access to build on your land? If not, then the project's at risk. Also, if you don't have the adequate skill or maybe professional team helping you, then again, you're putting yourself at risk. So in the construction industry, that's why architects and engineers are usually involved when you design a building, and they can predict how the building will perform, and they can guarantee that it's not going to fall over. So a lot of people that I've been hearing about, they sometimes like to build things by themselves, which is admirable, but it does put them at risk. And I'd like to mention that because I don't want people's buildings to be falling down or people to be injured, and then expensive lawsuits can happen. And I've literally been on a building site where somebody just fell down and cut their leg open and ended up passing away. So it's tragic, but luckily all the health and safety protocols were actually in place, and so there was no lawsuit. But construction is very dangerous. I hope I haven't scared anyone off. It shouldn't kill you. Okay, so the different approaches that we like to use. Now, this is when, if you are doing a project, you're planning a project in a different community, so maybe not your own community, and you're helping somebody else to start their project. So we like to think of or implement the bottom-up development approach. So this is the teach a man to fish approach, and impart new skills to communities and to people, and then to wait for people with their new skills to come up with an idea and a project of their own. Because in this way, they become invested in the project and they're passionate to see the project to be implemented and to be maintained. The opposite of this is the top-down approach, where you come into a community and you say, oh, you must do this, this, or this. And we see this a lot in the NGO world, and a lot of NGOs are donor funded, and they come into a project community and they say, oh, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. And they make people aware of things that they weren't even aware of before. And then if the NGO's funding is paused and the NGO can't continue with the project, then the community are actually in a worse position than they started off. Because before, at least they were naive to the problems. Now they're aware of the problem and they don't have the skill to solve the problem, and so they become unhappy. Okay, and then the second approach is to have a positive association to waste management. In the world of recycling and environmental protection, I've noticed that you see a lot of this. You must recycle and you must not litter. And we like to have a different approach of positive reinforcement. And so that, rather say like, oh, we see that you're recycling already, or, oh, we see that you're keeping your playground really clean, well done. And first find things to compliment people and communities for before you start criticizing them. And the ratio that you should do this apparently is 5 compliments before you give negative feedback. And in this way, you don't get people to be defensive. Because think about it, if somebody comes to you and they judge you for doing something and you don't know them, you're not going to be very open to sort of change. Okay, and then the last approach we like to use is the participation incentive. So we know this to encourage people to just make EcoBricks for something in return as a reward, because then, say now you're doing it with chocolate, you're giving every person who makes an EcoBrick a chocolate. If the supply of chocolates stops, then why would they continue to make EcoBricks? But if you educate them as to why it's important to make EcoBricks, and you reward those that do with an experience, something that they can participate in, or even help them to create something that they can build and own themselves, then they become proud of something that they've done, and they're much more likely to maintain those eco-conscious habits with or without external support. So look, we want the impact to be sustaining. We want people to take up habits and to then sustain those habits. We don't want it to be a once-off affair. Okay, so now let's give some different examples of projects. I like to have the approach of to start small and achievable first. So something like a garden is a nice one to start off with, because it requires relatively low resources, low cost, and it also produces vegetables. So it in of itself, it creates a yield which can be then used, the vegetables can be used to trade, to keep people participating. Maybe they can keep on bringing their food waste to make compost, or maybe they can extend the garden and they can keep on having a need for more EcoBricks. So with or without external help, this project can continue. So these are some examples. I must note though, the example on the top left, it's on the left on my screen anyway, where you can see the mostly blue EcoBricks, that is a during construction photo. So EcoBricks never like to be left exposed to the sun. But that photo was taken during construction and then it was plastered over. Below it, you'll see how it looked when there was plaster over it, and they had a little truth reveal wall on the south side of the garden. So on the side of the garden that doesn't receive any direct sunlight. I just wanted to note that, because a lot of people, I've been noticing, they see the photo on Instagram on the top left and they think, oh, that looks so pretty, I'm going to replicate that. But then that's problematic because the plastic can photo degrade and the plastic can leak out of those EcoBricks. Also, in a few years' time, if then people have forgotten about the project and somebody else comes in, they won't know what the situation is, and they'll think that EcoBricks are bad because they're leaking plastic into the environment. So this was the first raised bed vegetable garden we built, and the idea is that it was the shape of a door, which if you use companion planting and you implement permaculture principles, then you can feed a family of 4 using the vegetables that you can grow. Look, I don't think that it will provide every vegetable and everything that they need to eat, but it can certainly sustain them. So we moved to Cape Town in 2018, just as the drought struck, and we were planning a raised vegetable garden in the drought. And so we then decided to use the wicking bed system, which is, it's a raised bed vegetable garden. It uses about 300 EcoBricks to build, but we built this in such a way that the water is contained in a reservoir, and basically the plants always have access to this water, and so it doesn't evaporate and it doesn't go down into the groundwater. And so you use way less water and the plants grow faster because they're never in a water stressed state. So this is again the octopus garden, which I showed you before. And here we used a different technique to build the raised beds. You'll see we used 2 layers of corrugated iron The EcoBricks were stacked in between them, and then sand was used in between the EcoBricks. And there's a photo missing here. So the final step was to trim the edges of these timber members and to throw a layer of concrete on top of the sand. So the concrete isn't touching the EcoBricks, but the concrete is there to edge off the walling so it's comfortable to sit on. The reason why, so Felix Holmes from Flat Rock Studio, he was the maker that helped us with this project. And together we needed to innovate a system where we can have a fully recyclable recipe of building EcoBrick raised beds, because we knew that we only had a maximum of 2 years where this garden was built. And then the whole thing might have to be moved or demolished. And so we needed to make a system where we could build with EcoBricks, but in such a way that all of the materials could be recycled. And actually now, before the 2 years have been up, we've already had to move parts of it. And I'm pleased to report that no EcoBricks were damaged in the making. And all the material can be reclaimed and reused. Okay, so here you can see how it was a lawn at the top, and then it became the Octopus Garden, which is an urban farm at the bottom. And this garden is looked after by Mike Berry, who is a permacologist, and he did a fantastic job of looking after it all by himself. And to date, which has been, the garden was planted in July 2019, and its first harvest was in September last year, and up till now, it's generated 5.5 tons of fresh organic vegetables and herbs, which have been donated to 2 food security NGOs operating in and around Cape Town. And in a pandemic, this has been significant because it's been able to, every week we harvest about 100 to 150 kilograms of produce from this garden. Okay, and then some examples of expos. This was an innovation lounge which we built using our different flat pack kits. This was our first expo ever done in 2014 at the Open Design Festival in Cape Town. And this was at the 2015 Design in Dala. And then eco champion Caroline Hanks and her team Orbit and Paul have built a lot of EcoBrick structures here in the Western Cape. And the great thing here is that I've been mentoring them, but none of these projects I was around when they did it. So what we've started to do, and now it's helpful in the time of COVID, is we provide the instruction manuals and the guidance, and we remotely support other people to build projects. So if you are listening from other countries or different cities, please feel free to reach out and to see if we can help you. We do some just consulting over Zoom, and we give you the information that you need to do your own project. Here's another example of a nice stadium design, which we did in connection with Yomalela Primary in Kailicha and the Earthchild project. This project was sponsored by Adidas. And the idea is that each class made EcoBricks, and we turned those EcoBricks into little stools, and then the stools are wrapped in the branding, and so that they're shielded from the sun. And then the students could design different patterns to stack them into the stadiums. So when they're not using them as tools, they could be stacked away. And then this is a bench project out in Vredenburg, the West Coast, where these 3 benches were made, and each of the benches contain the equivalent of 38,000 chip packets. And in Vredenburg town, there's 38,000 people. So it's kind of a nice correlation. So this team of EPWP workers did a great job, and they learned the skills necessary to build these benches. Okay, I'm nearly wrapped up. These are some of our Ecobrick maker kits, as I showed you. We started doing sun protecting covers for them so that you can have them outside. The image on the left is here in my garden. And yeah, oh, some buildings, mustn't forget about that. These are some more of the pictures of that building you saw before. So this is how the wall, the internal wall looked like during construction and towards the end. Look, this building was funded by the city of Cape Town, and Ashley Hemorrhage, the architect there, was kind and wanted to use the building to show different materials. So ordinarily, you wouldn't be able to see all these Ecobricks like this, but it was a nice project that they could display them. But usually you wouldn't actually be able to see the Ecobricks once the walls are finished. The outside walls, a lot of the outside walls were, they used car tires filled with rammed earth. And even the bricks on these paving bricks were recycled bricks that they used. This is in the inside one of the classrooms, and this is called the storytelling tree. You can see some glass bottles in the tree, and that tree is actually hiding a pillar within the wall. Okay, and my last slide is to show Trevor Davies, and who connected me with SciFest, who has enabled this exciting project outside Grahamstown, and it's still under construction, but it's fantastic to see how 5,000 Ecobricks here were used to build a home. As you can see, the Ecobricks are still exposed, so they're still going to be plastered over, but it was really fantastic to see such innovative and proactive example like this. Okay, so now I hope there's some questions. I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Okay, thank you so much. It was a wonderful presentation. So just to start off with, as you mentioned, the plastic bottles and Ecobricks, they're not load-bearing entities. So how do we tackle this challenge when it comes to sustainable building?
That's a very good question. Oh, someone did their homework. Okay, so yeah, Ecobricks are not load-bearing entities, so they need to either go into a structure that has concrete pillars or timber pillars or metal pillars, and then the Ecobricks are packed between either mesh or another system of using the Adobe natural clay material, which is a really nice combination. But there again, you do need vertical supports in between them, and then the Ecobricks get compacted down with the Adobe going in between and plastered over once again. So the bottle being a round shape means that it does take a little bit more thought and effort to pack them, because you need to factor in that there's these funny places around the bottle to either fill with plaster, or you can also use boarding to conceal them. That's another method. I've answered that.
Okay. Yeah, definitely. And just coming back to with the issue of plastic being flammable, how do we,
Okay, good. I'm glad the fire question came up. A lot of people ask, oh, but isn't plastic flammable? Yeah, so that's another reason why it's very important that you don't leave Ecobricks exposed. So the idea is that you either use a thick layer of plaster to encase the Ecobricks, or you can use fireproof boarding. If you're using lightweight construction methods, then you can use fireproof boarding, and then you get other types of products which go around the Ecobricks, which are fire retardant products. So yeah, so that's a really good question, and it must be planned around so that you mitigate the risk of fire.
Okay, thank you. And then another question that just came through is, one second. is, other than making EcoBricks yourself, are they available or are they hard to come by?
Good question. Okay, so we hope that this is going to be changing in 2021. In February, March this year, we were so excited. We created a new system of portals and a new collection system, and then the pandemic struck, so we couldn't launch it. But if you go into our website, you'll see that there's a locations page where you can see where the closest portal is to you. And the idea is that we're not using drop-off points anymore. The drop-off point system proved faulty from a quality management perspective. People weren't finishing the EcoBricks properly, or they were using wrong materials to make the EcoBricks. So, but now that there's a wider variety of ways that you can construct with EcoBricks, there is starting to be demand for EcoBricks. So we're starting to sell them. And when we sell EcoBricks, then we can use the money that we sell to sustain the programs in the under-resourced communities. And so we can then exchange their EcoBricks for food or what resources they need. So we are getting ready to then start doing that in 2021. And you'll see that the displacement method of using EcoBricks to displace concrete or soil is a great way to build with. And we can see that that's going to start changing the supply and demand issue.
Okay, thank you, Ian. We have a question from Catriona. She's asking, what are their insulation qualities?
Also a very good question. So the combination of plastic and air make EcoBricks very good insulators. But the trouble is that because they're handmade, the innovation of the EcoBrick is that you don't need any technology, and that it means that every EcoBrick is different. So up till now, there hasn't been a unit standard which has been achieved to say like every EcoBrick achieves at least that insulation value. Which means that when we're designing buildings with them, if we are using them for thermal regulation, we can't only rely on them for thermal regulation. We have to use additional material surrounding them to achieve the insulating value. So it's a complicated way to answer that question, but basically every EcoBrick is different.
Okay, so how effective are EcoBricks compared to our traditional bricks?
Okay, well, so we've already covered a few of them. So they function, that their EcoBricks aren't designed to carry load. Another big difference is their shape, just because they are round and normal bricks aren't. I spoke earlier about how it's possible to build with them in such a way that you can reclaim them and reuse them again and again, versus a lot of buildings today are made out of concrete bricks, which if you use them once and then demolish the building, that brick gets then thrown to landfill, and our landfills are running out of space. What's another difference? So the size, the function, and the recyclability. I think those are the three main differences. Oh, and the ability to make them. Sorry, that's the other difference. The ability to make them in your own home is a big difference.
Okay, so do we have evidence of EcoBrick becoming a sustainable project with economic benefits, and can you sell them?
Not yet. That's a good question. That's what we're working towards. But you see, this is what I mentioned earlier, is that to pay someone to make EcoBricks at this stage, it would be more expensive than a regular brick. So there, the economies are difficult. But if people are making them because they're wanting to clean up their environment, which amazingly in South Africa, a lot of people are doing. At our portals that we're managing, people are making EcoBricks and then donating them to us for free. They're not wanting anything in return, which is phenomenal. But I should also note that these are people living in middle to upper income areas where they're not doing it as a form of income, and they have the luxury to not worry about income. So we want actually EcoBricks to be made in under-resourced communities and then we do want to create that income opportunity. we've got a few systems and pilots that we're working on, and we hope that then this will change the game in South Africa.
Okay, so if a community had to get started, what would they require? Do they need prior education in the area, or can they start from scratch?
Okay, so to get started, we do run the training programs, but we run educational programs first with schools, and we like to partner with existing either eco clubs or organizations working with schools, because then they've already got relationships with the schools. We don't like to go around starting new relationships. We like to rather work and collaborate with people. And so, yeah, there's quite a few projects that you can do remotely. So I showed you those gardens and those benches. A lot of those projects, I've never been to the site. So we can, through consulting, we can then help people. We've also got a frequently asked questions document, which is available if anyone wants. I'll be happy to email it. And that shows you exactly what you need to consider before starting your project. And it covers those risk items that I mentioned. I'm enjoying all these questions.
And then we have another question that in some of the photos, the bricks are stacked horizontally and sometimes vertically. So what determines this? Good
question. When you stack the bottles horizontally, the wall can become quite skinny because it's just the Ecobrick and then a little bit of plaster on either side. Okay, so that means that you can make quite a skinny wall. But when you lie the Ecobricks down, look how thick it becomes. And sometimes that's a good thing, because if you're doing the outside walls, you want it to be really nice and insulating. So then it is nice to do it this way, because then the walls are nice and thick and they're very insulating. So it keeps you warm in winter and cold in summer. So I guess space is, how much space you have. If space is an issue, then use the lying down method. But if space is an issue, you might want to have the vertical system.
Okay, thank you. So earlier you'd mentioned about permaculture and its principles. So we wanted to know, what is the connection between permaculture and ecobricks? And is there something about the ecobrick beds that makes it easier for permaculture?
Okay, thanks for raising this, because I didn't really bring it back together in the green economy like I meant to. So the Ecobrick Exchange, we started to build schools out of bottles, but over time we've developed into now a skills training agency within the green economy. So we teach different types of upcycling skills, and some of them are using Ecobricks, some of them are using food waste that you compost. And so with that, we see that we are aiming in different directions. So that it doesn't matter if one day, as I said, the Ecobrick is extinct, we still are doing skills development to strengthen the green economy. And with regards to the raised beds, raised beds are fantastic. If you build them with Ecobricks, great. If you build raised beds with other materials, also great. I wouldn't say that there's any hidden advantage of an Ecobrick raised bed to a normal raised bed.
Okay, so we have a question on Facebook from Pranjali. She's asking, what makes Ecobricks different from plastic materials? And do you think it might actually promote the production or the use of more plastic?
I'm really glad. That's a really good question. You don't want ecobricking to be perpetuating the use of plastics. So that's why I spoke to the fact that we want ecobricks to become extinct. At the moment, let's look at chip packets, for example. If you are living in one of the handful of cities in South Africa where chip packets are being collected for recycling, then in order to get 2 Rand to get back, you need to collect 819 chip packets to get 2 Rand back. Show me someone who's going to do that. So it's not a feasible wood system, and a lot of forms of the single-use plastics are not currently recyclable. But as the industry is evolving in South Africa, so you mentioned Petco, that we work with Petco sometimes, and we won one of their prizes. So they're the body that are there to incentivize the recycling of PET plastic. So you know how you get different types of plastic on, there's those triangles with the different numbers in them. So PET is number one, and it's the clear bottle. So I don't have one here. This bottle is green, but actually this was a PET bottle which they then added color to. So the PET plastic, they've found ways that they can recycle the plastic back into a bottle. So it's a closed loop system. But the other forms of plastic, like the chip packets and things like that, they don't have that closed cycle yet. So hopefully the technology is going to be evolving, or more forms of plastic are going to shift to PET. And for that reason, we always encourage people to avoid using clear plastic bottles if they can get their hands on bright yellow ones or green and brown ones, because, like, for example, this bottle, this yellow one, is not recyclable at all. All the bottles of this color in the country are going to landfill right now, versus clear bottles are quite valuable and people will recycle them.
Okay, thank you, Ian. And with this month's theme being climate change, we wanted to know whether they find Ecobricks to be an effective tool for climate action.
Okay, I don't think so. I'm going to be very honest. I had that slide about the green economy, and how the green economy has got climate change and all the different factors in it. I feel as though climate change is more about the emissions. I guess within the construction space, if we are using Ecobricks to displace the amount of concrete that we use and cement that we use, then yes, it is having an effect on climate change, because we're reducing the amount. So we just did a building here in Cape Town where we used 13,000 Ecobricks to displace 42 cubic meters of concrete in that building. And so yes, that then reduces the amount of emissions related to concrete. So I guess yes.
Okay, we have a comment from Londiwe who says, thank you for that. It was very informative. By the way, we promote Ecobricks to our visitors, and we are making them as well. So thank you for that. And that's a great initiative.
Great.
So from our end, other questions? No, so I think I'd just like to end it with just on your thing. What is the future of Ecobricks?
Okay, so as I said, hopefully by 2035, they'll become extinct. The future of Ecobrick Exchange, we continue to do skills development programs. So just before the lockdown here in Cape Town, we started running our Green Economy Apprenticeship program. We're getting ready to relaunch that. And basically it teaches artisans to have the skills that they can start their own projects in their communities, and they can recycle, they can use Ecobricks, and they can make their own garden so that they can have a sustaining project. But in the time of a pandemic where food security is so rife, that they can then find ways to grow their own food. So as you know, I'm a passionate edible garden designer, and so I want to be doing more and more projects like that.
Okay, and we have one more question. Does the plastic that you put in the bottles have to be clean?
Yes, that's a good question. Yes, it does need to be. So you'll see in the instruction video about how to make Ecobricks, we covered this. But again, I mean, one or two crumbs in a chip packet isn't going to be the end of the world, but dairy and meat-based products are problematic. So here at home, if we're doing the dishes and we've got a cheese-covered plastic, we'll rather just wash it first. We won't use additional water. We'll just use the grey water that we've already got, and we'll wash that plastic, because dairy especially creates such a odor. And look, when the other thing with plastic with Ecobrick quality control is that if you get an Ecobrick that's been made with a lot of really, really dirty things, over time you start to see this horrible like vapor come. So that's why clear translucent bottles is important, so you can see if there's a problem with the Ecobrick cleanliness.
Okay. Thank you so much for that, Ian. I think from our side, that would be it. So thank you so much for your lovely presentation. And thank you to our
You're
audience.
welcome. Thanks for the opportunity.
That was very interesting, and I hope that things work out perfectly.
Thanks, Sam. I hope to meet one day.
And thank you to our audience. This session would not have been the same without your interaction and your questions.
Great questions.
Yeah. And I'd just like to end with a note that SciFest will be having a virtual festival for 6 months. So please visit our website as well as the Facebook page to see the upcoming events. And you can also get recordings of the previous events that have happened. So with that being said, I'd like to thank you all for attending today's webinar, and I wish you a lovely evening ahead.